lot of our biggest songs were recorded not in a big recording studio, but in hotel rooms. That Love the Way You Hate Me, Become the Enemy, Wish You Hell, and Break Free were all recorded in this complete MacGyver setup that we had, where we would be on tour, and we would take recording equipment into hotel rooms each night after the show, and we would work on these songs. And I thought, this is probably something that a lot of people don't know. We made our first album, our very first record, The End of the Beginning. We made that in a big studio. We went in and we had all the gear. The producers on that album were amazing, and we learned so much from them. That was the complete LA album experience. Like when you grow up and you're reading about Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and Rage and Foo Fighters and all these bands that are Nirvana, all these bands that are making records in Los Angeles, you develop this thing like, dude, we got to make an album in LA. And we made our first record in LA, and we got to do that. We got to go into a big studio and have all the toys. But for our second album, we kind of felt like we wanted to try something different. And the funny thing about us is that we don't really like to turn things down. So we had already committed to making our second album, and then like tours started coming in. We started to be offered some like really cool tours, and we didn't want to turn these down. And the thing about the music business is, like, you don't necessarily know that those opportunities are going to come back again, particularly not when you first start out. So when you first start out, you pretty much like want to be on deck for whatever it is someone is offering you. And we had this instant conflict where it's like, okay, we're making a record. The fans that we've made from our first album and from touring that first album, where we went all around the US, those fans are expecting that we're going to make a second album. And we want to make a second album. From all the touring we've done, all the touring we had done up until that point, all the people we'd met and all the places that we'd been, we had a lot of stuff to write about. Like, we were very inspired to make that second album. What we didn't have was time, because now we're on tour again. And we kind of came up with this crazy system where, because we had always made our own demos, we had learned how to use Pro Tools. We'd learned how to record, we'd learned how to edit, and we'd even learned quite a lot about mixing. So we had kind of like built these skills, and it never occurred to us that we would ever be applying those skills in hotel rooms to make album 2. But the thing is, when we started making these songs on tour, not in a big studio, just in a hotel, we realized that actually it's incredibly liberating. Because the thing about a big studio is that part of you is always watching the clock. Part of you is always aware that even if you're getting the best deal in the world, studios are very expensive, and the people who are operating the studio, rightly so, are also being paid. So it's not like a carte blanche, you just go in there and like spend however long you want in there. I mean, you can spend however long you want, but you're going to pay for it. So we knew that this being our second album, we didn't have like an unlimited budget to just do whatever we want and make, you know, our version of Chinese democracy. We knew that we had to like be realistic about it. And as soon as we started making music in hotel rooms, then we started realizing that actually we have a lot more time, and we can use that time to make the music better. we can use that time to try different things. A lot of the stuff that we're now known for, things like having the didgeridoo like featured in our songs with heavy guitars and drums and bass. That stuff that kind of is like a Storm's thing. I'm not sure that we ever would have come across that had we been in a studio where you're just like paying by the hour. There is a conflict always between like budget and creativity. And the amazing thing about recording and mixing and editing and writing in hotel rooms is that you just pay by the night. So you pay by the night, you can do whatever the fuck you want with it. They think you're going to sit in there and watch, South Park or something. But what we were actually doing was making a record. And what was really funny is initially we started to do this like after the shows were finished. So we would be out on tour, and like we were out on tour with Sick Puppies, for example, in the States. Which was pretty awesome because they're Australian, we're New Zealanders, and we're both touring the US. So that in itself is always pretty cool. We would wait until the end of the show. So like we would play, they would play, you go out and meet people and take photos, and then you go back to the hotel after that. And then you set all this shit up. And we had like 2 luggage carts. Like there's luggage carts that they have in the entrances of hotels. Every hotel that we stayed at, all of a sudden 2 of them just disappeared because we would roll up and load 2 of them with gear. So we were like taking studio gear that we had amassed over the years of making our own demos. We took it out on tour with us, and then at the end of each night we would put that gear on luggage carts, 2 of them, and wheel them through the hotel to our room. And it was always quite funny because we never really wanted to alert the hotel staff to what we were planning. So we would always say things that were quite sort of opaque, like, oh, can you try and put us like as far away from the other hotel guests as possible? That's always been one of my favorites, because you're not going to say to them, hey, we're going to be screaming our asses off, and the people next door probably aren't going to like that because now they can't hear South Park anymore. So we didn't ever tell them what we were doing. And fortunately all the gear was in road cases, so people had no idea what it was. They probably just thought, man, these guys have a shitload of luggage. Like they have so many different outfits or something. And every night after these shows, we would like wheel all the gear in and then set it up, and then we would start recording. And of course, if you start recording at the very end of the night, then you're going to be recording like basically all night. So if you wait for a rock show to finish and then you begin recording, you're now basically like a fucking vampire. Like you're completely nocturnal. And so we used to work through the night and then sleep right up until not checkout, but until the person comes and knocks on the door. And we always had this running joke that there was no point setting an alarm because our alarm was housekeeping, housekeeping. Like that was what woke us up. And instantly one of us would be like, oh yeah, we're just packing up. And you'd look across the room and the room is like pitch black. Like no one is moving, much less just about to pack up and vacate the room. But that was what it took at that point in time. We had a record to make. We fortunately had the gear and we had sort of acquired the knowledge of how to make our own records, how to run Pro Tools, how to edit, how to mix. But what we didn't have was time to go into a studio and do it. So we ended up in this like crazy situation. Anyone who has ever been on tour knows that just being on tour is exhausting. Never mind being on tour and making a record. That's like taking 2 exhausting things and trying to do them simultaneously. So we figured that like there was some tweak that had to be made. There was something that had to change. And what we realized is that one of the things that could change is that some of us could come to the hotel earlier and start recording while the other bands were still playing. Because when you're on tour, like, you always do go and watch the other bands, and there is a real sort of it's like a respect thing, that you go and you see them play, and then you go, you go tell them what a great show they had. There's a lot of, it's like a professional courtesy. But if you're on tour with a band, then like, you're doing the same show every night, basically, the same set list, and so are they. So you don't have to watch their entire show every night. So once we'd seen the show a few times, then we realized that rather than waiting till the very end of the night, what we should do is just play our show and then leave. Go back and start recording. Not leave because we didn't want to be at the venue where the concert was, but leave because we had to be able to start recording sooner so that we got another few hours under our belt. And what's really funny is I still have people coming up to me now and talking to me about specific shows. In fact, it happened like literally a few days ago. Someone was saying, yeah, and I saw you guys play with Sick Puppies, and then at the end of the night, Kemp was there signing, but you and Chris weren't to be seen. I couldn't see where you guys were. I just figured that you were sitting backstage. And what's fucking funny is that I remember that specific night. Chris and I were at the hotel finishing Become the Enemy. That's why we weren't signing at the end of the night. It's because we were literally in a hotel room at that point in time, like finishing the guitars and vocals for Become the Enemy. And it was this crazy situation that went on for pretty much the whole making of that album. What's more crazy about it is that those songs then all went on to be top 40 US rock singles. So we're making this album in the most crazy situation. Like, you come in from the end of the night at a show of playing like a concert. I mean, you're beat, dude. Like, you are exhausted. And then you set up all the shit and then you start recording. It's completely insane. But that was what it took for us to make Awaken the Fire. And more than that, once we started doing it, we realized that we actually enjoyed the freedom that came with producing the music ourselves and producing it in a place where you're not conscious of time. So you can spend more time trying things like, hey, what happens if we put the didgeridoo in the middle of Love the Way You Hate Me? Up until that point, we'd never done anything like that. We'd had didgeridoo as an intro track on our first album, but we had literally never had it playing like with the band. It had always just been this like kind of intro vibey thing. And I'm quite sure that we never would have done that if we hadn't been making that album in hotels where, fuck it, you set the gear up, you're going to be awake all night, you might as well try it. Like, if someone's got an idea, you might as well try it. Because you have the time, you're not going to sleep, so you might as well make the most of it and try these different like creative ideas that people were having. So I thought that's kind of a cool insight into how we make music, but also like how we made that music, that album, those songs, which are, you know, in many ways, a lot of the songs that we are known for as a band. They were made not in a big glossy LA studio. They were made in hotel rooms around America while we traveled around touring with Sick Puppies and all kinds of other awesome bands. And it kind of gives an insight into our creative process too, because we've sort of carried that forwards. We're not recording in hotel rooms anymore, and where possible, we try not to record while we're on tour. Although the B-sides for Catacombs, Black Rain Hurricane and Death Defying, we literally were recording those while we were on tour with Godsmack and Shinedown in the US. So you might say that some of those old habits die hard. But we have, for the most part, moved away from that sort of nocturnal vampire 24 hours a day madness. But what we've kept is that kind of creative process where you're not watching the clock. We realized it was more important to us to have the time to experiment and make the music that we wanted, ultimately. That was more important to us than to be in like the place, to be in the studio with the people and doing it like the proper way. So in many ways, that time represents like a fork in the road where we kind of went on our own path. And that's the path that we've been on ever since. So I hope you guys enjoyed this insight into Awaken the Fire and how those songs were made. Go give Love the Way You Hate Me, Become the Enemy, Wish You Hell, or Break Free or Listen, and see if you can hear the housekeeping lady.